Response video to Laura Layla, post a link. Back on this simmering subject of determinism, free will. So I'm just going to throw another log on the fire, see what happens. Don't have anything brilliant, but it's just so obvious what's happening here with some people. It's they're requiring determinism to be observable. They're requiring it to be demonstratable. And that just can't happen. We don't have the perception capacities to see it. We can't observe it. We can only understand it theoretically. We can only understand theoretically how it works. But there are clues. I mean, there are obvious indicators of the fact that there is none of this randomness. It's like your personal computer. When it's required to come up with a random number, it has to manufacture one mathematically. It's not truly random. All they do is create a number so large and one that is so convoluted in terms of how it's manipulated that there's no practical way we could see any patterns in it. But there still could be patterns in it because it is not truly random. It's manufactured out of playing with the timing cycle of the computer and using a number to indicate that timing cycle. So anyway, it's and that's happening. I mean, so that's an indication, kind of a giveaway that, hey, wait a minute, we can't really come up with this random thing. We can't create a random experiment. We can't create anything that ever creates a truly random result. There's so many ways to try to get to this, but let's just understand our inputs first. What we are dealing with as machines, as people. So we have our nature, the natural reflexes that are semi-common to most of us. And then we have this thing called conditioning, which is basically just another set of reflexes that are tied to our emotions that give us a sense, a feeling, sometimes an immediate reaction, but usually it's this chemistry of disposition and mood and how we viscerally react. It's a layer on that very rudimentary native impulses, and it's kind of, it doesn't have a real structure. I mean, it's all culturally dependent on your circumstances, how you grow up, what environment you grow up in. A lot of things are going to decide what you turn into in terms of your native preferences, your native disposition, your subjective likes and dislikes. And those are the ones that are really hard to change, like sexual disposition, food preferences, a lot of different things. We can see how we are kind of controlled by that ancient programming. And it's rather arbitrary programming, what color you like, that kind of nonsense. All right, then through our lives we acquire this thing called knowledge, information. And so that goes into our brain also, this raw knowledge base. And we play with that information. We tie it to our emotions, we tie it to a lot of different things, we bounce it off each other, we do experiments with it in our brains, and we create new conclusions, new perceptions. We modify our conditioning, we stimulate our conditioning. It goes both ways. But it's just another form of reflex. It's another form of tying a reaction in our brain to a stimulation, a word, a representation, a symbol. I could say the word money, and the word money is going to create a reflexive reaction that's going to be unique to each person. It's going to be associated and tied to different concepts, depending on where you are in the world and how you've been connected to that concept. But there's no freedom in any of that part of us. I mean, I think you could all acknowledge that you can't just extract knowledge. You can't know who Einstein was or what color the hair was on his butt by just looking up and saying, I want to know. All right, you have to acquire the knowledge and put it into your brain. Somehow it has to be put in there. So that's what we are, basically. We got all this stuff going on. It's very complex. There's a whole bunch of these little neurony things, a bunch of connections, a bunch of wiring, and in the end, there's this thing that comes out of it all that's called this will thing, okay, where you make decisions, where you're brain draws a conclusion and says, yeah, put your hands here. Okay, I didn't ask, I didn't say, there's no conscious experience that said, oh, do this with your hands. It just happened because that's my personality. That's the end result of my the nuance of my interaction with the world. This is how I've learned how to swim. That's all it comes down to. This is my swimming behavior. And it's going to be unique to me. I want to walk my way and I want to talk my way, and that's the byproduct of where I come from. What grew me, what fed me through my existence, through my life. So let me get back to my point. So there's decisions made. Your brain draws conclusions all the time, makes things happen, triggers new reflexes. Snap my fingers. Didn't ask it to. The brain did it, okay, in the subconscious. But it didn't do it because of some spontaneous energy. It did it because of my programming, because of my reflexes, my personal disposed reflexes. And so if we have a circumstance where there's two doors, you have to pick one, and one door is labeled A and one door is labeled B. And one door is painted blue and one door is painted pink. You could imagine that if you weren't possessed with a great intelligence, that you could react to the way the letters look. You could say, well, I like that letter's got a point on it, I don't like the pointy thing, the round one seems friendlier, so I'll pick the friendlier door. Or by color, you could say, yeah, I don't like pink, so I'll go with the blue door. So you can see how people could react reflexively, emotionally, based on their conditioning, their culture even. I mean, if you put a cultural symbols on the door, maybe that would make a difference. Or a sports team logo on the doors, like somehow that would make a difference to people. They'd find one more appealing than the other. But then we can intellectually know that if we know as a fact that it was completely arbitrary based on what door was painted which way, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing to what's behind those doors. Well, then we could know, well, the decision's not one I should be making emotionally, but at the same time, I'm not given any information or any capacity to make any intellectual determination of what door is better. So you're stuck with this very complex decision that your brain has to make, because it's got to make a choice, and it's in the end, but there's no information, so it can't be an intelligent decision, and so all you're left with is something subjective. But in the end, it will make a decision. It will just do an eeny, meeny, miny, mo thing. It'll do a, okay, I'm A, I'm B, I'm A, I'm B, and now it stops. And so it just lands on B, because it decides to stop now. The time runs out. Okay, time makes the decision sometimes, and that's another part of this thing. We're all living in a time scale, and so a lot of decisions might just be made because your brain gives it 30 seconds, or it gives it 15 seconds, or it gives it 10 seconds, and it says there will be a decision made. And it just says, this is the limit, this is how much time you have to spend, nothing more. And it triggers it merely by saying, well, whichever slant the needle's pointing, on, off, whatever one it's at, when the time runs out, that's how the decision is made. I mean, but there's no will in here. There is a will. Let's not confuse terms, okay? We will things, we want. Our brain makes decisions, but there's nothing free in how the decisions are made. They are made based on how you are conditioned and how you process information in your brain and what information you have. So anyway, getting to her video, like I said, she focused too much on our capacity to perceive it, which is just completely irrelevant. I mean, all we can do is understand determinism as a theoretical proposition. It is not something we can see. We're never going to see it. We're never going to feel determined. All right? It's always going to feel like we're acting, because our consciousness is only going to see it that way. It's only going to see the raw in and the raw out. It's not going to see the processing that takes place behind the screen. And the only other issue is how does then do we apply something like responsibility for behavior? And we can still apply responsibility. I mean, there's stages to what a law is. First, it's a statement by a culture that says, okay, it's wrong to rape. So we would expect people merely to say, okay, like we all understand it, you should be able to understand it. I mean, it's not complicated. You can't take from somebody else. You don't harm somebody else. Really simple, okay? Then we say, okay, well, if you're really too stupid to get that, we have a law that says we're going to punish the hell out of you if you rape. Now, we don't want to do that, but we're just saying that, look, if you're too stupid to figure it out on your own, here's an extra little bit of information. We're going to fuck you up if you fuck somebody else up. And so that's another deterrent. And then so if somebody steps over those two humps, I mean, first, they don't get something that every human should get. Second, they don't get it when we said, look, we're going to beat the shit out of you if you fucking do it. We have a right to say, well, that's a really broken human being. That's a really broken computer. That's a broken processor. It makes really dumb decisions. Somehow, with all this evidence against the behavior, they committed the behavior. So we can still be very judgmental. It's just that our judgment can't be that there's some like the individual itself is responsible for the brokenness. The brokenness exists, though, and it has to be dealt with. It can't be ignored because it causes real harm.